Today, Matt Rhule had his first press conference in over a month, and he dropped some massive revelations on the future of Nebraska's spring game, a transfer portal target who didn't fit the culture of the team, what spring practice is going to look like, some breakout players, and so much more. So in today's video, I'm going to dive into all of it, along with an update around Nebraska's NFL draft prospects and how they've been performing at the Senior Bowl. So really quick, we have a lot to get into. Nuggets episode, hit that like button if you're fired up. And also, if you're a diehard Nebraska fan, you're unsubscribed, we are 5 subscribers away from 11,000. Let's hit it today, please. I post daily Husker football content. Anything you want, I got you covered. So join this family. Hit that subscribe button. Thank you so much. But without further ado, let's get into it, talking about Matt Rhule's press conference today, because, man, he dropped a lot of gems for Husker fans. I want to get things started talking about the spring game. Now, of course, I broke that news earlier this week, talking about how I believe that Nebraska wasn't going to have a spring game this year. Troy Danon, later that day after my video, basically clarified. He said, yeah, there isn't going to be a spring game. Then Matt Rhule basically talked about it today, saying the main reason that we're not going to have a spring game, as I previously said, was because of the transfer portal, that these teams are trying to poach some of our young players, and Matt Rhule just doesn't want, these broadcasting companies like BTN to air a public practice where you get some of these young freshmen, playing at a high level who aren't really going to play this year, but are in our future long-term plans. So again, it just shows you that the transfer portal is such a big threat for not only Nebraska, but all of these programs. That's the number one reason we're going to go away from it. The spring game in general didn't make enough revenue for us to keep it for the long-term future. Again, what's going to happen, and Matt Rhule didn't tell you this today, but what I expect to happen is they're going to do basically a closed practice where you can buy a ticket, $25, $30. You can go there. It's going to be no photography, no videography like we had earlier in the fall, but you can see the team practice. It's not going to be a scrimmage, but you can still see the team. That's what I expect to happen. Obviously, that's not going to be televised. You're not going to see clips on the internet, but that's probably the route that Nebraska is going to go on April 26th, but there's not going to be a true spring game pretty much ever again, and I think that's probably for the best in this transfer portal period. Again, we should remind ourselves that Chief Borders was a guy who played really good in spring ball for Nebraska last year, and Pitt came and poached him up. We had guys who got injured like Demetrius Bell, who we're going to talk about later in this video. So anyways, he gave some clarification to that. Basically the same reasons I told you guys on Wednesday why the spring game is not going to happen. So that was interesting. I thought it was also interesting. He said something about the transfer portal. Somebody asked him, he said, Matt Rhule, are you satisfied with the portal players that you brought in and some of the misses that you didn't end up bringing? And Matt Rhule said something that I thought was really interesting. He said that he's not going to ruin the culture over one transfer portal edition. He basically said, he didn't name a player, but he said that there was one transfer who's pretty much a done deal. They felt good about him committing. He came on a visit, and it became very clear with his interactions with the players, with the coaching staff, that it just wasn't going to work out. Not this guy isn't a terrible human being, but he just didn't fit the culture, and he went on his way. Now, we can speculate about who this is. I think I feel pretty confident this is Eric Rivers, FIU wide receiver transfer. All signs pointed to him committing to Nebraska. Obviously, he didn't, went over to Georgia Tech instead. I don't know. That's just me speculating. Feel pretty good about that. But again, I like that answer by Matt Rhule, right? It's very important to set a precedent, to set a culture. You don't want to ruin that over one guy. You don't want to overpay. You don't want to, have somebody coming in here for $1 million to have him act like a diva. It's the team over me. And I think that he did a good job about that in the transfer portal process. So that was interesting. Then he talked about some breakout players, which I thought was really interesting, particularly on the offensive line. People have always speculated over the past couple weeks, is the reason we're not taking offensive linemen in the portal because of some of our younger players. And he said that Preston Tamoa and Grant Bricks, those are the two players he mentioned, he feels really good about, and they're going to have a real opportunity to start next year, let alone be in that 2 deep. But, him name dropping those guys specifically tells you everything you need to know. It should be noted that both of those guys were in the 2 deep for the Boston College Bowl game. So that is interesting, but I'm going to expect us to get Rocco Spindler here very soon. I feel good about that. And he also said Demetrius Bell. If you guys are OGs of the channel, even dating back to last spring, I was on the Demetrius Bell train. I was telling you guys every day, Demetrius Bell is playing out of his mind in spring practice. And Matt Rhule kind of affirmed that today. He said, yeah, Demetrius Bell was awesome. We expected him to start if it weren't for the injury he had in the spring game last year. So expect Demetrius Bell. I know this is a good receiver room, but I think Demetrius Bell is going to be top 5, top 4, top 3 receiver. Same way I felt last offseason. He talked about the spring practice and what it's going to look like. I made a video about this about 2 weeks ago, kind of exposing Matt Rhule's plan a little bit, but it's going to be an NFL format. And Matt Rhule's done that in the past. Of course, he was with Carolina. You have a 105 cap limit now. He said that there's going to be 70 or 57 players on a normal roster. So basically that's the depth chart, those top 57 players. And then there's going to be, besides those top 57, there's just going to be depth pieces. That's kind of going to be our scout team a little bit, our practice squad. And then he said the bottom 10 players on the 105. So number 96 to 105. Those are going to be the culture setters. Those are going to be walk-ons, basically. Like, he wants to keep a roster spot for those guys because they allow practice to go smoother. They're like glorified coaches. He name-dropped Roman Mangini of being that guy, just an enforcer, right? Roman Mangini's not going to play necessarily, but he's just a guy who helps those practices go well. He continues to, help these other guys get better. He's a glorified coach. So that was really interesting that he mentioned that. But it should be noted that, again, he's going to treat this is he going to treat the spring like NFL practice? He has 125 guys on the roster right now. I'm going to have to cut that down to 20. Nobody is safe. He mentioned Deshon Singleton. He said that Deshon Singleton had a third-round NFL draft grade on him. And yet Deshon Singleton came back for another year. I thought that was really interesting. I'm not going to lie to you. I call cap. I'm just kidding. But I don't think Deshon Singleton had a third-round grade. Matt Rhule said he did. Listen, Deshon Singleton's a good player, and I'm higher on Deshon Singleton than most of the fan base is, but he struggled last year. He struggled in space. He struggled in coverage. He has a really good build, and he's a hard hitter, but he's dealt with injuries, and I don't know. I don't know why Matt Rhule said he had third-round grade. I don't buy that. Like, let's be real. If Deshon Singleton entered the NFL draft this year, he'd probably be a 7th, maybe 6th-round draft pick. But I do love Deshon Singleton coming back, and he said that Deshon Singleton's expected to make a big jump, so that should be noted. He also said that there's no timeline for the special teams coordinator. So, again, we're not going to hire a special teams coordinator very soon. It doesn't really matter when we hire them. They're not a recruiter. I'd expect something in the next 2 months before spring practice on March 26th. One last thing that I thought was really interesting from his press conference. Somebody asked him at the end about Dylan Raiola and what he needs to do to continue to be a leader. And Matt Rhule right at the end said that Dylan Raiola needs to continue to eat right, practice hard, get to his proper weight. He specifically said Dylan Raiola needs to get to his proper weight. I thought that was interesting. Like, Dylan Raiola, I think what really happened with his weight this year was he was so focused on gaining weight, putting on muscle the second he got to Nebraska, where, obviously when you're eating that much, when you're working out that much, right, you're gaining a little bit of fat along with muscle. So, yeah, he did have a little bit of a beer belly in there, right? But Dylan Raiola, again, I think he's going to slim down this summer. But it's interesting that Matt Rhule mentioned that he needs to go to his proper weight, because that's probably the right idea. Again, Dylan, I think him slimming down a little bit better is going to be good for his mobility, good for his elusiveness, good for him to get outside the pocket. So that should be mentioned. I know some people have been asking about that. Also, really quickly, want to give you guys an update around some of the NFL draft players from Nebraska who've been performing at the Senior Bowl and the East and West Shrine Bowl. The number one MVP of all the Nebraska players has been Isaiah Neyor. Interesting. Like, Isaiah Neyor was named East-West Shrine Bowl practice team. He was one of the best players all week there. Contested catch radius was great. Went up and got balls, showed off his speed. I mean, I know Isaiah Neyor's not a very popular guy, but I told you guys when he entered the draft, like, there's something there that NFL scouts might like. Like, he checks a lot of boxes. He's not great on film. He's not a great blocker. But from a physicality standpoint, from a measurable standpoint, he's going to really impress some scouts. And he did that at this week. You know who also had a good week at the Senior Bowl? Thomas Fidone. There were 3 players from Nebraska at the Senior Bowl. Okay, Tommy Hill, Ty Robinson, Fidone. Fidone had probably the best week. He did not look stiff at all. He moved pretty well, had some nice contested catches in there. Didn't block very well in today's performance at the Senior Bowl game, but I thought he honestly had a pretty good day. Now, is he going to get drafted? I still don't think so, just because he's damaged goods, right? We saw JoJo Domann, who was a past Nebraska player. He had a really good draft grade on him. He was going to go in the 3rd round. He ended up going undrafted because he had so many injuries in the past. I just think that's going to happen with Thomas Fidone there. Ty Robinson had a decent week. Nothing to write home about, though. He had a pressure today. He had a TFL today, so he played good in the actual game. Tommy Hill really struggled, man. Tommy Hill went from being a potential first-round draft pick to probably not being a day 2 guy. He might go 4th or 5th round. And then Nash Hutmacher, he was okay. He was okay at the East-West Shrine Bowl. nothing to write home about. I don't know if he gets drafted. I think he's going to be a 6th, 7th rounder, just with the way scouts are talking about him. So, all right, guys, wanted to give you guys that update around Matt Rhule's press conference and some of the Nebraska players who are balling out at the Senior Bowl and East-West Shrine Bowl. Let me know your thoughts down below about what you guys are thinking about Matt Rhule's press conference. Let me know in the comment section. Hey, if you made this far in the video, you know what to do. Hit that like button and subscribe. I appreciate all of you guys. Have a great Saturday. And as always, folks, go Be Grad, go Matt Rhule, and see you in the next one.